Right to go and looking. Good afternoon, everyone. Andrew Crisp is my name, Emergency Management Commissioner. I'm joined this afternoon by Steve Warrington, Chief Officer from the Country Fire Authority, Brett Sutton, the state's Chief Health Officer, and Kevin Parkin from the Bureau of Meteorology. So we're talking about tomorrow, about Friday. We're talking about heat, fire, heat and water. So what's confronting us tomorrow is the first total fire ban day across the state this summer. If you break that down, what does that mean? So what it means in the Mallee and the Wimmera at this stage, we're at extreme. What does that mean? So at extreme, if a fire starts, it's going to be uncontrollable, it's going to be fast moving. So this is a timely reminder for people, if you have not done your preparation and your planning in relation to fire, that you better get onto it, because tomorrow is going to be a high risk day for us across the state. So whilst we have extreme in the Mallee and Wimmera, we're also at severe in most other parts of the state and very high. So what it basically means is we've got an extreme fire risk danger day tomorrow across the state of Victoria. We've already had fires though. We've already had more than 700 fires since the start of December. Grass and scrub fires that have been well managed and well tackled by our firefighters, and again, they deserve our thanks for the work that they've been doing up until today and the work they will continue to do for the rest of summer. So it is that important message about, are you ready? Have you prepared your property? Do you have a plan? And importantly, when it comes to a plan, as part of that plan, if part of your plan is that on an extreme day or a severe day, that you will leave your property and you will go to somewhere that you believe is safe, then you must enact your plan, because as I said, tomorrow, we are at extreme and we are at severe across most parts of the state. There could be some further change in relation to the North Central and North Country, moving from severe to extreme. So further advice will be put out later today, in fact, if that does change. So again, I'd suggest if you've not got the Vic Emergency app, that you actually download that app, or you follow up in relation to the CFA website or the Bureau of Meteorology websites in relation to that particular information. Knowing how to access good information will enable you to make good decisions. So that's what we've got in relation to the fire picture for tomorrow, and Chief Officer Warrington will add some further comments to that shortly. Heat health is very important, and again the Chief Health Officer will speak to that shortly. The one area I want to spend a little bit of time talking about, and it's been tragic, the fact that we've seen a number of drowning deaths in the state this summer, and even if you want to focus on what's happened since Christmas Eve, we've had 7 drowning deaths in the state. Those have been at beaches, they've been by people just out swimming in the water, a diver at Cape Shank. We saw someone at a waterfall in the Grampians, someone in the waterways down at Paynesville, someone in a lake, Lake Victoria, and someone in an inland waterway at Violet Town. I just urge everyone to think about not just the numbers. Don't think about the 7 deaths or the 9 deaths since the start of summer. Think about these people as individuals, as people that had friends, that had families, that were all looking forward to experiencing a wonderful festive Christmas season, looking forward to the new year. Now that will not be the case in relation to those individuals and those friends and families. So my thoughts go to those friends and families, and the fact that we owe them something. So let's take away some lessons from these particular incidents. Also to people that tried to rescue these people, tried to support them, those first responders, whether they're other members of the public, whether they're members from Ambulance Victoria, Victoria Police, SES, Lifesavers and the others. These people are out there trying to do their absolute best to keep us safe. So again, in relation to downloading apps, I encourage people, if you haven't already got it, get the Beach Safe app. So it's about doing your homework before you go somewhere. Get that information that's going to enable you to make good decisions when you go to whether it's our inland waterways or our beaches. And we want you to do that. You know, summer in Victoria is a fantastic time. We want you to get out and about. We want you to enjoy yourself. Travel across the state. Go to the beaches. Go to the lakes. but you've got to do that safely. Where you're going to inland waterways, and in particular where obviously the Beach Safe Act won't pick up those particular areas, go to areas where there are other people in the water. Ask them if they're locals. Ask about what the local conditions are. Know what the surface of the water is where you're about to swim. So get that good information so you can make good decisions. Because again, we've got to take something from the tragic deaths that we've seen in the state, across the state. Well, we've seen in the state so far this summer. So I'll now hand over to Kevin Parkin, who will talk about the weather. Chief Officer Warrington will then touch some more in relation to fire, and then Brett Sutton from a heat health perspective, and then we're happy to take some questions. Thank you.
My name is Kevin Parkin, Senior Meteorologist with the Bureau of Meteorology. My role is to work closely with the emergency services and keep them up to date on emergency weather situations like that which is unfolding tomorrow, Friday the 4th of January, across Victoria. Last week we experienced heatwave conditions across the state. That hot air contracted largely to New South Wales and inland Central Australia, although arguably along the Murray River it's still being quite hot during that intervening period. That hot air, which retracted northwards, is advancing as I speak towards Victoria and will sweep across the state tomorrow. A low pressure trough is currently being tracked by meteorologists across South Australia, and that's responsible for dragging that hot air across Victoria. So what are we forecasting? 40 to 46 degrees widespread across the state. In fact, Mildura, top temperature 46 degrees for Friday, and in Melbourne 42 degrees. And if we do reach 42, that will be the first time that Melbourne will have seen a temperature of 42 since January 2016. If we compare that temperature to the record books, it's certainly well short. We saw back on the 7th of February 2009, Black Saturday, where we reached 46.4 degrees in Melbourne. So, Friday is going to be what we call a fire danger spike day. What do I mean by that? Well, it has all the ingredients that make fires difficult to control. It's hot. The air mass is particularly dry. We've got north to northwesterly winds that are quite gusty, that fan fires in the landscape. And probably the other element that makes the day more dangerous than it would be otherwise is a wind change. So while a lot of people often look forward to a cool change advancing across the state, wind changes can be absolutely destructive when it comes to enhancing fires. So what about the timing of the wind change? Well, it's a little bit earlier than what we would normally expect for a wind change moving across the state. We're looking at it reaching the southwest coast around sort of 6 to 7 a.m. in the morning. So in the southwest, we're not looking at a hot day down there. That wind change is expected to round Cape Otway around midday, through Hamilton, back up towards Edenhope in the Wimmera, and then reach Melbourne sometime between 3 to 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And if we see the extension of that wind change and the milder air that follows it back up towards the Mallee region. It's got a fair bit of punch, this wind change, so it'll continue into the late afternoon, evening, and it'll finally reach the far east of the state at night. One of the concerning factors of this particular wind change is the strength of the southerly winds that follow it. We're anticipating widespread gusts of about 70 kilometres an hour from the south and through parts of central Victoria, including Melbourne and Western South Gippsland, gusts as high as 90 to 100 kilometres an hour. So if you're on the beach and the wind change is approaching, it will become very gusty and even quite dangerous for a period when that wind change does come through. So please be careful and be cognisant of that sudden change in wind direction. The Bureau of Meteorology has issued a severe weather warning for that exact phenomena. So between 3 and probably 8 o'clock, when that wind change moves through central parts of Victoria expect these damaging wind gusts of around 90 to 100 kilometres an hour. And then the other aspect of the weather on Friday I'd like to bring to your attention is the risk of thunderstorms. This is something we haven't been advertising to date, but there is a perceived risk, particularly through central Victoria and parts of eastern Victoria, as that wind change moves through, that we'll see some thunderstorm activity develop. And the risk is there might not be much precipitation. And when we see situations like that, we can get what's called dry lightning and an increased risk of fire starts. So it's a big day from a weather perspective. And if there's any good news, it's the cooler change, which does move across the state, and it brings milder, more benign fire weather conditions on Saturday, with some precipitation across the eastern half of Victoria, although we're only looking at a few millimetres of rain. Thank you very much.
Thank you. My name's Steve Warrington, Chief Officer of CFA. So tomorrow's conditions are probably no Victorians would be surprised about. The reality is the mixture of hot, dry, windy conditions, a significant wind change are upon us, and we've seen this happen, and unfortunately it's unfolded in some cases the loss of life and the loss of certainly buildings and structures in our past in Victoria. So let's be a little bit scientific. So in the northwest of the state we've got two areas of extreme, possibly looking at the northern parts of Victoria as well, along the Murray River, that will also go into extreme, which means these fires will be uncontrollable by us, unpredictable and absolutely fast moving. So what does that mean? It means that in Victoria we have some of the most professional, really experienced firefighters that are sought after all over the world in both CFA, MFB, Forest Fire Management Victoria, Parks Vic, etc. And indeed the whole emergency management sector in Victoria is prepped and ready to go. We have 50 odd aircraft, I think more than anywhere else in the country, on the ground ready to fly at any moment to hit these fires hard and fast should they occur. We have our trucks and crews and management teams. The fire services are absolutely ready. So the message from a fire service perspective now is, what can the community do? What can you do to make sure that you're able to survive and get through tomorrow's conditions? One of our primary concerns is there are a lot of campers out there, and some people would then be travelling, and if I channel the Murray River or the northwestern parts of the state, the reality is our concern is about people getting on the roads but going into conditions they're not familiar with, particularly given the strength and the early parts of the change. So the wind change is the biggest killer in our state. We know that will come through Melbourne at about 4 p.m, according to the Bureau, the Mallee area about the same time. That's with wind gusts up to 100 kilometres per hour. And it is important then that people, community, particularly if you're deciding to travel, protect yourself from radiant heat. Our advice would be, don't get on the road at that particular time, and even consider delaying your return home from holidays or being on the road at all at that particular time. For others, the rest of us, if you like, it is time to activate your plan. Now this, when I talk about plan, it could be simply, what are you going to do with mum and dad? What are you going to do with the kids? What are you going to do with the pets? Have a thought about where you would go if you were caught in a fire, whether that be on a road, whether that be in your camping location, or indeed whether you're just at home going about your daily commute, etc. Tomorrow is a spike day. It is the first spike day in real sense for the whole state. The fire services, the emergency services, we are ready to go. And now what we're doing is urging communities to take their part to ensure all Victorians are safe this summer, not just from fire in your plan, but the broader emergency role as well. Tomorrow is a key day for us. Let's make sure we're prepared for it. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Brett Sutton, Chief Health Officer. My key message is really that heat also kills. Obviously there's a fire danger, which is something to be aware of, but heat is absolutely a killer as well. In 2009 there were an estimated 374 excess deaths from heatwave. We haven't got those same heatwave conditions, but there are still extreme heat alerts for much of the state, including for today. So Mallee, Northern Country, North Central, North East and Wimmera all have heat health alerts for today. For tomorrow, most of that arc in the north also has heat health alerts, but East Gippsland has a heat health alert for tomorrow as well. Wimmera does not, and central, including Melbourne, is very close. Obviously a very hot day, but there's relief overnight. So that's the only reason why it doesn't have a heat health alert as well. That said, most of the state will experience, the potential danger of those extreme temperatures. The vulnerable individuals are those over 65. They make up more than 80% of deaths from heatwave conditions. Pregnant and breastfeeding mothers, babies and very young children, those with pre-existing medical conditions such as diabetes and heart disease, and people on certain medications. The disabled can also sometimes suffer increased effects of heat, as well as those who are obese. So if you know of vulnerable people, look out for them. Make sure you check in by phone, by SMS, or if they're neighbours, touch base with them face to face. Because a lot of people are socially isolated or live alone, and it's a very useful exercise to make sure that they're travelling okay. For anyone through today and tomorrow, make sure you drink plenty of water. Make sure that you get in a cool place. So use your air conditioning, use your fan. If you haven't got those, draw the curtains, draw your awnings at home, and when that cool change comes through on the Friday evening, Saturday morning, open the doors up and let the heat out, because homes can really retain a lot of heat, and you don't want to suffer the additional burden of heat in the home through the Friday night into Saturday. Never put kids, adults, pets in hot cars. The temperature can double in minutes and be absolutely deadly within a very short period of time. And then make plans. So if you've got scheduled events in the heat of today or tomorrow, and you can cancel them, cancel them. If you can move them to a cooler part of the day, do that. And if you can make arrangements to be in a cooler place for the heat of the day, and you haven't got air conditioning at home, go to a library, go to a shopping centre, whatever's required. Those are the key messages from me. The main one, really, be aware that it's deadly and check in on those who are most vulnerable.
Brett, just while you're still there, when you're saying about kids in cars, obviously that's important every day, but how important does it become when we're talking about a 42-degree day?
It's absolutely critical. It will only take 10-20 minutes for temperatures to be potentially deadly, and when the car doors are closed and the windows are up, it's literally a matter of minutes before children, the vulnerable, can become unconscious. Obviously, you never leave kids deliberately in cars. People forget, so be aware of who's in the back seat. But also kids can lock themselves in, and a lot of the ambulance call-outs are for opening vehicles. But just bear it in mind and be aware that it's only a matter of minutes. If you see anyone in a car, make sure that you're calling to break into that car, whether it's MFB or ambulance, to make sure that they're safe.
And Brett, you mentioned the risk of thunderstorms. Is there also a risk of thunderstorm asthma conditions?
No, we're actually beyond the season of risk for thunderstorm asthma. Effectively, it's a high risk in November. There's ongoing monitoring through December, but December 31, we're happy that there's not a risk of thunderstorm asthma.
Any local hospitals, are they primed for potentially more heat-related admissions?
Yeah, of course they are. So Ambulance Victoria, Justin Dunlop is our State Controller for Heat. He's obviously keeping an eye on what the presentations to emergency departments will do. An ambulance can ramp up their surge capacity. They can certainly see the effects from today to see whether they need to ramp up tomorrow.
Does anything comparable, because you mentioned not the deaths in 2009, heat-related deaths, and someone else mentioned that this will be the hottest since 2016. Do you have any stats on 2016 and heat-related issues?
We don't, but 2009 had 4 days of consecutive heat, so that was a really extreme period. There have been comparable 4 days of consecutive heat where we haven't had as many deaths. I think we do communication and awareness much better than since 2009. But there will be scores of people who have cardiac arrests or who present in a really severe state by ambulance. We know that much, including people who are found deceased at home. So there will be over the course of a summer potentially dozens of people who will die by virtue of the heat. So nothing to set aside as something only for other people. You need to think of yourself as being vulnerable.
Cameron, can I just ask you, Murray River communities between Albury and Echuca are going to experience
So 40 degrees across northern districts towards the Murray River, obviously not unusual in summer, but it does come back on a sequence of 40 plus degree days only last week, and we're still seeing temperatures in the mid-30s along the Murray, so it has been an extended period of hot weather up there. And, you know, summers are hot, but we are looking at 46 degrees in Mildura and 44 to 45 along the Murray. I don't think it doesn't matter where you are in the state, that's pretty hot, and I certainly wouldn't want to be outside.
Is this a sort of a sign of things to come for the rest of summer, do you think, or is this a bit of a one-off for this week?
Fortunately, it's a bit of a one-off, and it's all about where the wind is coming from, or what we call advecting the air from. And in this instance, we know the air mass over inland Australia has been particularly hot, well above average, in the mid-40s for an extended period of time. And it just so happens that we have what we call a low-pressure trough that's travelling across South Australia and dragging that hot air back over Victoria. And then once that trough moves through, the winds turn around to the south, and that then starts to bring cooler air from the Southern Ocean, and we see quite a significant drop in temperatures. I think earlier on I mentioned when that change moves through, there'll be a very rapid drop in temperatures of 10 to 20 degrees in a very short space of time across southern districts in particular, and that milder air mass will stay with us for quite a few days. It'll stay warm in the north, but certainly well short of 40 degrees next week.
In terms of when, for Melbourne, when are you likely to start seeing that temperature really increase, and then just the timings in terms of increase and then that cool change coming through?
One of the caveats for people that live in Melbourne is you've got to cop the weather, because it comes from all directions and in all shapes and forms. And we know in summer we will get more hot days, and it's just a matter of looking at how the weather systems are tracking. And at least next week, we're not looking at another significant hot day in Melbourne, and we're just looking at when the wind will turn around to the north again and start moving that hot air that's across the inner part of the country back towards Victoria. So possibly we'd be looking at maybe next weekend at the very earliest, but obviously we'll keep the community up to date.
And in terms of tomorrow's weather, when should we start seeing, like, is it from early morning that we'll see the temperatures rising, and then when do we see that cool change kicking in the afternoon?
That's right. It's fortunately in southern Victoria we do see the temperatures drop quite nicely overnight, but a day like tomorrow, those northerly winds will kick in quite early, probably not long after sunrise, certainly by 8 o'clock, and the northerly winds will be responsible for escalating the temperature quite quickly. So potentially by 10 a.m. in the morning it'll already be 30 degrees in Melbourne and through many parts of Victoria, and then the temperature will continue to rise quite sharply ahead of that wind change when it comes through, which it looks like it'll be moving up the surf coast during the early part of the afternoon through Geelong 2 or 3 o'clock, and certainly in the Melbourne area in that sort of 4 o'clock ballpark.
Steve touched on this earlier, just in terms of telling people what to do to put their plan into practice. I was just looking for some clarification from someone. When they're told to put a plan into practice, can you remind them of what exactly you'd like people to do in terms of fire risk?
Yes, again, thanks for the opportunity. I mean, I think the best thing from a plan, if people visualise a plan that's written, that I'm going to put a document together, the reality, all we're asking people to do tomorrow in particular, is understand where they're geographically located and intend to travel on that day, whether you're travelling or stay at home, and just think about what are you actually going to do if a fire occurred wherever you are within the state of Victoria, or indeed travelling across southern New South Wales or South Australia as well. So for us, think about what's your priority in your life. Make sure that you're protected from radiant heat. We know that's the biggest killer. We know the biggest killer is on the wind change. Where are you going to be at that time the change comes through? Where are your loved ones going to be? Where are your animals going to be? Where are your possessions going? And our advice is, firstly, don't be there in the first place. So your plan might be as simple as, look, tomorrow I'm not going to travel. Tomorrow I'm going to stay at home. Tomorrow I'm going to go and visit either to a shopping centre or visit somebody that actually in my street even that has a safer house than mine, because that's my plan that I'm going to do. So it doesn't, I mean, preferably we'd like a written document, but as long as you've thought about it and communicated that with your family, that's all we're asking to do. What are you going to do if a fire occurs tomorrow? That's what a plan is. Have a plan and chat and talk about it with those around you about what are you actually going to do.
What are the risks, just to, I know it might seem obvious, but what are the risks if you don't put those plans in place?
On the worst case scenario, I mean, Victoria, Southeast Australia is one of the worst. There's 3 primary bushfire prone areas in the world, and Southeast Australia is one of those spots. We have a long history, dating back as long as civilisation here, of fire fatalities, property loss. We've lost, literally, 173 people, sadly, on Black Saturday, is not that long ago, 2009. 2,000 homes were destroyed on that day as well. So there is history here. And so it is incumbent upon us as agencies, emergency sector, to work together to make sure that people are safe. Already this year, the biggest issues we have are campfires. Already we're having fires started from campfires. We have about a dozen fires already burning in Gippsland from lightning, and some of those from campfires. We have haystack fires happening in the west of the state at the moment, simply because spontaneous combustion is happening in hay. So they're the 2 biggest issues that we have at the moment. But if you throw into, the Bureau's just told us that we've dry lightning, we have strong winds, it's going to be hot, dry, we have a strong wind change. It is a recipe for us to go, we need to be on our game collectively as emergency service and our communities to make sure we all come home, go home safely, particularly tomorrow, but as we move forward.
On that issue of dry lightning, are there particular parts of the state, this might be a question for the Bureau as well, are there particular parts of the state that are likely to be affected more than others?
Kevin?
On hot days like Friday, there's always some risk of what we call convection and thunderstorm activity. But we think the greatest risk exists between 4 and 8 o'clock in the afternoon, extending from the northern country, which is the Murray region, down through central Victoria, so through Seymour, through the Dandenong Ranges, down towards South Gippsland. So we're down in that sort of patch, if you like, in that 4 to 8 hour slot.
Right, if there's no further questions, thanks very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much.